Hey, everybody. How's it going? What'd y'all think of the movie, huh? I thought it was great. Well, I'm going to introduce these guys as they come up. My name is Scott Hines. I host Fanboy Radio. I was on there just a little bit. You probably saw way too much of me. This is Todd Kent, the director of Comic Book Literacy. Yeah?
Hello.
I agree.
Hello.
Then we have James O'Barr, who was also in the movie. He is the creator of The Crow, as well as many other fantastic comics. You've got to check him out online and buy a lot of his stuff. You've got to buy a lot of all these guys' stuff. Mr. James Disco, which I think a lot of you guys know, from The Echoes of the Lost Boys of Sudan. And we have an associate producer, is that right? Yep. Ethan Ante. He's right here. Titan Comics. Check out his store. We have Terry Moore to his left. He is the creator of Strangers in Paradise. A great comic.
And Echo.
And he was in the movie quite a bit. To his left, Weldon Adams, who is the big donor of Heroes for Heroes, gave a lot of his comic books away. Big supporter of comic book arts. And then we have Mr. Ben Dunn, the creator of Antarctic Press and the godfather of American manga. A great creator. Thanks so much for joining us. So this is a question and answer session. I'm going to start off with just a couple of initial questions. We're all big comic book guys here, so if we start getting into our own world, I'll try and snap us out of it, because we could talk about this stuff forever. We really love comics. We love seeing all of you guys out here and your enthusiasm, paying so much respect and great attention to the movie. I know you guys liked it as much as we did. If y'all have any questions at all, just come right down to the front or just yell them out. How about that? Just raise your hand and yell them out, and we'll answer them as best we can. Throughout the movie, we were hearing about the impact comics had on all of the creators when they were very young. And before we actually came out, a bunch of creators and I were out in the back, and we talked about the power of the image and how the visual picture helped us remember things probably much more than the words. And there was a picture of a big old monster in the middle of the movie saying, "You'll never forget Googam," this giant clay monster. I'm like, well, when I see that picture like that, you're right, I probably won't forget it. The lessons that are in all the comics are very memorable, probably because of the illustrations. And is that really what makes it special? I'm just going to let you guys pass down the microphone. But Todd, talk a little bit about what makes comics special. Is it the images that does it?
Yeah, it's a big part of it. A lot of the comics, especially the more well-loved characters, are very visually striking. You see Spider-Man, and it's just like, oh. I remember being actually frightened as a child the first time I saw Spider-Man because the mask and the eyes and the webs. But I think, especially when it comes to getting the kids interested, the first step is just getting them, excited, getting their attention, and that's, I think, what the visuals in the comics do.
When people ask me why read a comic book versus watch a movie or read a book like Harry Potter with no pictures, I tell them that the power of the picture is a comic book has more power than a book or a movie. Because imagine this. Imagine that I've done a comic, and on one page there is a picture there that is going to get me in big trouble with my mother. And if I leave that comic book out on the table, that picture is there to be offensive and get me in trouble all day long. All you have to do is walk by the table and look down and see that picture. I'm in trouble every time you look at it. You don't have to read the story or watch the movie to be offended. You're offended instantly because the picture is right there in your face.
You were in trouble a lot, weren't you, Terry?
I was in trouble a lot. Whereas, for instance, if it's a scene in a movie, you have to participate in being offended. You have to say, "That's terrible. Rewind that. Watch that again. Isn't that awful? No, rewind it. Watch it again and again and again." But if it's on the comic book, there it is all day long on your table. Okay, now flip that and imagine that the picture is wonderful and it makes you feel fantastic, and it answers a question for you or something, then that picture is fantastic all day long, just laying on your desk, or put it up on your wall. Every time you look at it, you don't have to read it. It doesn't take 5 minutes to recreate the fantastic feeling. You don't have to rewind the movie or reread the whole page of the book. There it is, instantly. It's instant. And that's the power of the comic book. That's why we have to be very careful what images we put out there, because people forget what they read, but they never forget what they see.
The power of imagery really can't be overstated, and you run into it all over the place, and a lot of the time you don't even think about how an image is being used in conjunction with words to get an image across and into your head in a much stronger format. A great example of this is the way coaches will diagram a football play. You can tell someone what you want them to do when they get out on that football field all you want. Or you can just take a little chalkboard, you draw a few X's and O's and lines and a couple of arrows. Everybody on the team knows exactly what the play is. The entire group can operate as one unit out there, all because of one piece of artwork on a chalkboard, instead of a long, complex explanation of where everybody was supposed to go and what they're supposed to do. That same power can be used in a wide range of ways. In the movie I was talking about, Texas History Movies, one of the things about that book that was fascinating to me was that the creators would flip from panels, sequential art panels telling a story about individual characters, to a diagram showing a battlefield formation. And in just a few panels, they could do the exact same thing, X's and O's and lines and arrows, and you understood entire army troop movements. It's a very complex thing, a military maneuver. And they did that in 2 or 3 panels, and then they would drop right back into sequential art of people talking, and you realize those X's and O's represented people. Those were events that were affecting whether people were going to leave the battlefield alive or not. Very, very powerful imagery, and just with a few X's and O's on paper.
I think comics, especially when we're very young and we're learning how to read, offer a challenge, right? They say, can you read this? Can you understand it? They help us. The images help us with the words, and the words help us with the stories, and they both help us with the stories, to tell you the truth. But they offer a challenge, and even modern comics, even the real deep superhero stuff, which a lot of us love, they challenge us to understand exactly what's going on and all of the back history and things like that. It's like following a soap opera some of the times. But in comics, especially when you're young, I know I learned how to read in general from reading Spider-Man comics. Does anybody here learn how to read from comics? I was one. Anybody else? So there you go. Yeah, lots of people. Yeah, there you go. Is that pretty much what?
Yes.
Comics
and many other things, yes.
I can personally thank Marvel Comics character The Beast from the X-Men for my vocabulary.
Really?
Reading the X-Men comic as a child, the Beast had a particular habit of using big words. He was a very brainy character, so he was using all of these scientific terms all the time. And being a very curious child, I would have to stop and go get the dictionary to read my comic book so I can understand what's he talking about here. So that helped my vocabulary immensely.
Comic readers don't really like to read about dumb characters. We really like our smart characters, and we like them to be smarter than us sometimes and teach us things. And those are some of the very best comics. Except for the Hulk. The Hulk can be dumb and green, and we love it. Again, just raise your hand if y'all have any questions for the panel. Yeah, there's one right there. Go ahead. Me personally, I have a good friend that has Asperger's syndrome, functional autism. Yeah, with functional autism, and comics are an essential part of his life because it also is a very, very social medium. While you have to usually just read it, just either you and your family, or you and just one other buddy at a time, you want to meet with people who have read it and talk about it, and it gives you so many great social cues and visual cues, and uses both sides of the brain, which is something that we know in the industry a lot about, because it really stimulates and captures both levels of literacy, I would say, because it's really just not about words. It's about the context of the words. And like Terry was saying, if you see a beautiful picture of a palace in the mountains, that doesn't necessarily tell you the story of Cinderella. Well, all of the words in a book doesn't really give you the full experience of that story, but a comic really can. And in between each one of the panels, you're filling in the gaps.
Oh, I'm not an artist, but I was going to say that one of our longtime customers, when he finally became old enough to work, he became a part-time employee there at Titan, and he had Asperger's as well. And he was just, the comics were what gave him a lot of his education and helped him, because any of you who know what some of the problems are with that, he wasn't very sociable generally like that, but whenever he could start talking about the comics, it helped him a lot, and it helped him to interpret what some of the customers were looking for as well by looking at their reactions that they were giving them. And we would have school teachers come in a lot of times too, and we would donate comics from the store, sort of like Heroes for Heroes. We would donate a lot of comics to the stores and to the libraries, and some of the teachers were teachers who were either doing it for ESL, English as a second language, or they were doing it for children who were having a harder time reading or had developmental issues, to help them learn beyond the regular picture books and Dick and Jane and stuff like that, because I did Dick and Jane as a kid, but I also read a lot of the Peanuts and would reread it and use my silly putty. But once you read the Peanuts, you see by their facial reactions and some of the things they said, either in the comic strip or when they put them out in comic books, the philosophy of life. And I think that's helped some students with some of the teachers that we've worked with there.
You know, being interested in cartooning since I was just a kid, I spent most of my life studying body language, things like that, which is the basic building block for cartooning. Any animation cartooning is built on how simply can you convey emotions and what body language can tell you. So I think you'll find that most of the working cartoonists have a lot of enthusiasm for this topic. I've never heard of a project where psychologists or therapists were working with a cartoonist to develop a book specifically for the teaching of autism. I did read a related article a week or two ago, a new study showing that the kids zoning out for all their screen time, when they test them directly after 2 or 3 hours of screen time, whatever they're looking at, that they are less capable of recognizing responses and the body language of real people. That fades away over a couple of hours, and then they're back to normal. So we may be developing socially some sort of a stronger need for this kind of communication, where the kids can balance out the zone out time for a screen with reading about human interaction, and maybe it will be helpful. So this need that you're talking about, it may be more apparent in the future to therapists.